picture this, okay? It's this surreal, almost hyper-modern visual. Like, Gen Z protesters are just completely flooding the streets of Nepal.
Yeah, laying total siege to the parliament.
Exactly. Vehicles are burning, the air is thick with smoke, and like right in the middle of this absolute chaos, someone is waving a massive flag from the anime One Piece.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's wild.
I mean, it is a scene that feels ripped straight out of a dystopian graphic novel, But this actually happened, and it ended with the complete collapse of the government.
It's just such a striking image because it captures the modern era perfectly.
Right.
You have this globally recognized symbol of youth, of pop culture, and it's juxtaposed against genuine, visceral political violence. It really forces you to look at how globalized digital culture intersects with, like, local physical fury.
So true. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. For you listening, our mission today is to unpack a really highly charged stack of documents analyzing that exact government collapse in Nepal.
Yeah, because according to the analysis we're looking at today, that anime flag and those burning vehicles, they aren't just an isolated incident of local unrest.
No, not at all. The argument here is that this is actually part of a much larger, repetitive geopolitical playbook sweeping across Asia, like a pattern affecting Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and potentially looking toward India next.
Right. But we need to put our cards on the table before we dig into the mechanics of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're diving into materials that lean really heavily into regime change theories, the deep state, superpower rivalries, structural geopolitical manipulation, all of that.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Really heavy. So for the listener, our job today isn't to endorse these theories or, take sides.
Exactly. We're strictly impartial.
Right. We are just putting these arguments on the dissection table to see how the logic holds up. We want to map out the anatomy of these claims so you can understand the exact narrative being pushed by the source material.
Perfect. So to understand how a country gets to the point where, the military steps in and the prime minister resigns, we have to look at the spark.
The initial trigger.
Right. And in Nepal, that spark was surprisingly, it was a bureaucratic tech policy.
Yeah, which sounds so mundane, right?
It does.
Yeah.
But the timeline here moves incredibly fast. So on August 25th, 2025, the Nepali government issues a sudden mandate. They basically tell all social media applications that they have exactly 7 days to register physical representatives inside the country.
7 days. Just 7 days to establish a totally legalized physical footprint.
Which is an absurd timeline.
Totally absurd.
I mean, it's basically like demanding a massive multinational corporation build a skyscraper in a week.
Right, yeah.
So by September 4th, the hammer drops.
Yeah.
Because obviously these tech giants didn't comply in a week. So 26 applications are banned outright.
It's gone, yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, they all go dark.
Right.
But there is a glaring exception in this tech purge.
And this is where it gets interesting.
Exactly. While all the American-owned apps went completely offline, the Chinese-owned app TikTok remained active and completely untouched.
Yeah, and that selective enforcement immediately raised major red flags for international observers.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, on paper, the government's stated reason for this mandate was accountability. They argued they were trying to combat fake news, online fraud, untraceable hate speech, things like that.
Which, sounds perfectly logical in a vacuum.
Right, because in the digital age, lies do spread incredibly fast behind anonymous accounts. So their claim was, hey, we need local representatives to help identify bad actors and comply with local law enforcement.
Sure, but demanding physical compliance in 7 days isn't just about renting office space. It's like forcing a massive ocean liner to make a 90-degree turn in a wading pool.
Exactly. You have to hire local legal teams, set up localized data servers.
Right. Integrate with regional law enforcement APIs. The timeline wasn't a mistake. It was designed to fail. I mean, it looks like a deliberate excuse to just pull the plug on communication.
And the public recognized that trap immediately. I mean, the government tried to frame this as this heroic battle against untouchable tech giants. But the reality on the ground was instant, devastating economic collapse.
Because when WhatsApp and Facebook go down, people don't just lose their meme pages.
No, the ban destroyed vast networks of microeconomies literally overnight.
Yeah, because social media is the actual physical infrastructure for small businesses in emerging economies. If you take that away, the supply chains just break.
Totally.
Yeah.
Look at the real victims highlighted in the source analysis. Consider the small homestay owner up in the Himalayas.
Right.
They relied entirely on Instagram to attract international backpackers or, the local vendor who moves their handcrafted inventory exclusively through Facebook Marketplace.
Wow, yeah.
Or think about the tour coordinator using WhatsApp to manage real-time logistics, weather warnings, transport for trekking groups. For these citizens, these platforms were not conveniences. They were survival mechanisms.
You strip them away and you literally cut off their oxygen.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the underlying fuel here. I mean, an app ban is infuriating, sure, but why does a digital blackout lead to citizens burning down the prime minister's residence?
Right, it seems like a leap.
It really does. But we have to zoom out and look at the physical reality in Nepal at that time. There is this staggering statistic in these documents. Listen to this. 2,000 Nepali citizens were being forced to leave the country every single day just to find work elsewhere.
Every single day. I mean, that is a quiet systemic crisis that is just bleeding the working age population dry.
2,000 people.
Imagine the hollowing out of communities when you have that level of massive, unavoidable unemployment.
Right, so people are packing up their lives. And while the everyday citizen is struggling to put food on the table, they're looking at their phones, well, before the ban anyway, and seeing a reality that just makes their blood boil.
Yes, the hashtag.
Yeah, hashtag goes massively viral. Hashtag politicians Nepo baby.
And this was the ultimate friction point, because the algorithm was heavily contrasting starvation with tax-funded luxury. The public is basically watching the children of elite politicians flaunting supercars and European vacations on the exact same apps the government is suddenly trying to take away.
Wow. Talk about bad timing.
The gap between the ruling class and the masses had just become visually inescapable.
So the tension is already at a complete breaking point, right?
Yeah.
And then Prime Minister Oli makes a fatal error.
A huge miscalculation.
Yeah, when confronted by the media about the massive job losses caused by the sudden app ban, his response was just a masterclass in arrogance. He essentially stated that he, quote, didn't care if a few people lost their jobs.
Which just shows he fundamentally misunderstood the entire landscape. Oli thought he was fighting a localized policy battle over media control, maybe some foreign influence.
A political game.
Exactly. He completely missed that the app ban was merely the spark. It gave the public a tangible excuse to unleash years of deep-seated, boiling frustration over corruption, nepotism, poverty, all of it.
But the human toll of that miscalculation was tragic. I mean, thousands of Gen Z protesters and students marched on Parliament.
And it escalated so rapidly.
It did. It was violent. 19 people were left dead. Over 340 were injured. And it all culminated with the army chief stepping in, approaching Prime Minister Oli and telling him his time was up.
And just like that, the government fell.
Yeah.
And this is where the source analysis takes a really sharp pivot from, a domestic tragedy to international strategy.
Right.
The argument is that Oli's failure wasn't just about misreading his own citizens. The author argues his ultimate fatal mistake was openly picking a side between global superpowers.
Okay, so going back to that selective app ban, kicking out the American apps while leaving the Chinese app, TikTok, running perfectly fine.
Exactly. By doing that, the author argues, Oli triggered the mechanisms of what they call the geopolitical deep state.
Okay, I have to challenge the premise here for a second, because when I hear deep state, I initially just think of, like, internet conspiracy forums.
Sure, yeah.
And it feels like a massive leap to say a foreign intelligence agency is secretly pulling the strings of angry Gen Z anime fans in Kathmandu. Are we really looking at orchestrated regime change? Or is the author just leaning on historical coincidence to explain organic grassroots rage?
It's a fair question, and the documents actually address that skepticism directly. They aren't suggesting, like, CIA agents were on the ground handing out one-piece flags.
Okay, good.
Right. The mechanism of the deep state in this context refers to a highly coordinated network of global power brokers, financial institutions, and intelligence apparatuses that operate to secure American hegemony.
I see.
So they don't invent the anger, they weaponize it, they use algorithmic amplification, they quietly fund local NGOs, and they provide the logistical scaffolding to turn a localized grievance into a full-on regime-toppling riot.
Okay, so it's basically about pouring high-octane fuel on a fire that's already naturally burning.
Precisely, and waiting for the right moment. The documents identify this clinical formula playing out across Asia.
Right, the pattern.
Yeah. First, a student protest begins over a specific localized issue. Second, it is rapidly amplified into violent riots that paralyze the country's infrastructure. Third, the military either shifts its support away from the government or, conveniently decides to stay neutral.
And finally, the government collapses.
Exactly.
And they point out this exact sequence happened in Bangladesh. Then it happened in Nepal. They note the same friction unfolding in Indonesia with actual warnings that India is the next major target.
Right.
The through line the author is drawing here is that countries in this region attempting to align closely with China are being systematically dismantled. Like Bangladesh tried it, the government fell. Sri Lanka aligned with China, the economy went bankrupt. Nepal walked that same path and collapsed.
Now, if you're listening and wondering if there is actual precedent for this kind of coordinated multi-track takedown, the author brings the receipts.
Oh, they definitely do.
Because this exact strategy, starving a country economically and digitally, funding opposition, forcing a coup, it's practically plagiarized from what happened in Chile in 1973.
Yeah, this historical precedent really anchors the whole argument for me. So, in 1973, Salvador Allende was the democratically elected socialist president of Chile, and he made a decision that directly threatened massive foreign financial interests. He attempted to nationalize Chile's natural resources, specifically copper.
Which was huge. I mean, copper accounted for nearly 50% of Chile's foreign exchange at the time, and those mines were largely controlled by American companies.
Yeah, Anaconda and Kennecott.
Exactly. And on top of that, 70% of the Chilean telecom company, Chitelco, was owned by the U.S. firm ITT Corporation.
Oh, wow.
Allende wanted that staggering wealth to stay in Chile to benefit the domestic population.
But the U.S. government and those corporate interests simply could not let that stand. And what happened next operates exactly like an aggressive, hostile corporate takeover.
Yeah.
But instead of buying up majority shares on Wall Street, they bought military factions, logistics networks, and media outlets.
It's intense. The analysis details a very specific two-track operation launched by the CIA, showing exactly how the money moved.
Let's break that down.
Okay, so track one was pure political subversion. The CIA funneled $1.4 million to opposition parties in Chile.
Just straight up funding the opposition.
Yeah, and when those parties actually lost the election, the money was used to loudly claim voter fraud.
Wow.
It's a mechanism designed to sow doubt into the very fabric of the electoral system, undermining the legitimacy of Allende's government from the inside out.
And then track two is where it gets incredibly kinetic.
Yeah.
Because this was the direct push for a military coup.
Right.
The documents note an estimated $8 million in total was spent here. And this wasn't just handed to generals in briefcases in an alleyway. They spent $700,000 directly funding a major newspaper called El Mercurio.
Which is such a key detail, because weaponizing a newspaper creates this reality distortion field. You use that money to generate constant, terrifying anti-Allende propaganda so the public feels like the country is already collapsing.
Yeah.
And then they funded a massive truck driver strike.
Which is brilliant in a terrifying way.
Yeah.
Because if the trucks stop, the country stops. Supermarkets empty in 48 hours. Panic sets in. You completely paralyze the Chilean economy without ever sending in a single U.S. soldier.
And the result of this coordinated pressure was just devastating. In September 1973, the military struck. The presidential palace was literally bombed by its own air force.
Unbelievable.
Allende was ousted, and a U.S.-friendly dictator, Augusto Pinochet, was installed in his place.
And Pinochet's regime became globally infamous for its brutality. I mean, he vanished dissidents. If you spoke out against the economic policies, you just disappeared into the back of a van.
Yeah.
And the documents highlight a very chilling piece of evidence here. A 1983 CIA manual titled Psychological Operations in Guerrilla Warfare.
Right, which proves this isn't theoretical.
No, it is a literal printed blueprint detailing exactly how to start riots, manipulate local populations, and even create quote-unquote martyrs.
And the concept of the martyr is a crucial mechanism in this playbook. The manual actually outlines getting someone killed by local authorities specifically to fuel further propaganda and escalate the violence.
That's incredibly dark.
It is. It takes organic anger and engineers it into uncontrollable rage. And the author emphasizes the aftermath in Chile to make a broader point about these interventions. Because the economic reforms implemented under Pinochet, they were designed by foreign economists.
Let me guess. Favoring foreign interests.
Heavily favoring foreign resource extraction.
So the intervention was never about installing democracy or improving the lives of everyday Chilean citizens. It came at a terrible human cost, including the total loss of a free press, all just to protect corporate bottom lines.
Exactly. And bringing this historical context crashing right back into the present day, the author argues we are seeing the exact same dynamic in the aftermath of these modern Asian protests.
Right.
Overthrowing a government is presented as this heroic victory online, but look at the physical reality of Bangladesh.
Yeah, let's look at that. Because what began as a student protest in Bangladesh ultimately resulted in Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina fleeing the country. But removing her did not miraculously create some democratic utopia.
Not at all. The state security apparatus essentially dissolved, and that power vacuum plunged the country into severe instability. The analysis specifically cites the horrific anti-Hindu riots that followed.
Because when you remove the central authority, minorities are often left entirely vulnerable to mob violence.
Exactly. Furthermore, there was absolutely no improvement in per capita income. The inflation didn't drop, the unemployment didn't vanish, the everyday citizens sweeping the streets was not suddenly better off just because the prime minister was gone.
And this is where the documents issue a really stark warning for India. Right after the government collapsed in Nepal, digital networks started flooding with messages urging Indian youth to, quote, wake up and follow Nepal.
And the critique of this push toward rioting is incredibly sharp from the author. They ask the reader to look at the physical mechanics of a riot. Like, when a mob sets a bus on fire or burns a train carriage, whose property is that?
It's public infrastructure.
Right. It was built using the tax money of the very citizens who are cheering for it to burn.
That is such a sobering point. Because when the violence escalates and the riot police push back, it's the families of the everyday citizens who are bleeding in the streets.
Police.
The politicians are sitting safely behind high walls and secure compounds, just waiting for the dust to settle.
And the analysis lists other modern examples of foreign intervention to hammer this point home. They cite Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. And they ask bluntly, did outside intervention make those places better, more stable, or more prosperous for the people living there?
And the conclusion drawn is a resounding no. It shattered them.
Completely.
You know, I found myself wrestling with a pretty heavy question while reading through this section.
What's that?
Well, if a government is genuinely corrupt, like the blatant, staggering nepotism we saw in Nepal, but grassroots protests are just going to be hijacked and amplified by foreign intelligence, what is the everyday citizen supposed to do?
It's a tough spot.
Right. Are they just trapped between corrupt local elites on one side and manipulative foreign powers on the other?
The documents do address this dilemma, actually. Their conclusion is that, look, no country is perfect and systemic corruption absolutely requires a solution.
Okay.
But they argue that real, lasting solutions require painstaking, ground-level political work, institutional reform, and time.
Which isn't flashy.
No, it's not. But it certainly doesn't come from anarchy. Overthrowing a government might feel cathartic in the moment, but it doesn't solve your existing economic problems. It just creates an entirely new set of infinitely more complex vulnerabilities.
So the ultimate thesis here is that anarchy wearing a quote-unquote revolutionary mask is just an illusion.
It only ever benefits the foreign string pullers. When the tear gas clears and the global media moves on to the next crisis, the manipulators hold the power and the profit. The citizens are simply left to sweep up the ashes of their own infrastructure and figure out how to survive the new power vacuum.
Wow. Let's just take a breath and look at the sheer scope of the journey these sources just took us on.
It's a lot.
It really is. I mean, we started with what looked like a clumsy 7-day bureaucratic mandate for social media apps in Nepal.
Yeah.
And that impossibility triggered a massive Gen Z uprising.
Yeah.
But looking beneath that spark, we found a powder keg of systemic unemployment, a hollowed-out economy, and staggering elite arrogance.
Right.
Then, the analysis pulled the camera way back, connecting this collapse to a clinical geopolitical playbook of regime change sweeping across Asia, a strategy that perfectly mirrors the documented historical mechanisms of CIA interventions, like the economic strangulation of Chile in 1973.
Yeah.
All of it building to a stark warning about the true devastating cost of orchestrated anarchy.
It is a massive framework to process. I think the final provocative thought the author leaves us with is something everyone navigating the modern internet should genuinely ponder. The next time you are scrolling through your phone and you see a viral hashtag surging or a sudden, highly coordinated wave of unrest trending on your feed, well, ask yourself, are you witnessing a genuine grassroots revolution of the people? Or are you just watching page one of a very old, very well-funded playbook being executed in real time?
Such a powerful lens to view the news cycle through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking for the underlying mechanisms, and we will catch you on the next one.